Please welcome Scott Aukerman and Neil Campbell.
Thank you, everybody.
Guys.
That was fun. For me.
Congratulations on the show.
Thank you. By the way, this is the head writer and co-executive producer, Neil Campbell.
Let's start from the beginning.
Shit. Oh, you want me to start? Oh, okay.
And I'm sure this is somewhat well-trod, but I'd like to hear a little bit about how, this Comedy Bang Bang has evolved over the past years to what we see today in the TV show, but from the podcast, even before that, from the live show.
Yeah, well, it started as a podcast, which was just kind of a radio show that I was doing for fun with my friends, where I would, it started out as I thought it was going to be me talking to comedians who were going to be on my live show that week. So like if Kevin Nealon was on that Tuesday, I would talk to him on the radio on Friday and just sort of promote it. And then it quickly evolved into me talking to comedians doing characters, because I thought that was really fun. I think around the 8th episode or something, Andy Daly, who's a really great comedian, came on in character, and that was really fun for me. So that's kind of what the show has evolved into. I'm still doing it. We're in our like 220-something episode right now. And that's sort of the format of the show. What it became is me talking to a celebrity, and then I also have comedians on as fake people. So that got kind of popular, and IFC, they were all fans of the show. And so they offered me a TV show to do kind of, it was very much unspecified what they wanted me to do. They said, do you want to turn it into a TV show? And so I didn't know quite what they were thinking of. At one point they were sort of talking about it like it was going to be a Watch What Happens type of like on 4 days a week kind of show, and it would be much more like the podcast. But then they said, no, I think we're going to order 10 of them, just 10 half hours. And when I started thinking about it like that, I started thinking, well, if I'm only doing 10 episodes of something and it's only a half hour long, I want it to be like more like a sketch show, more something that's more permanent rather than ephemeral. And they were very supportive. They said, yeah, you've always wanted to do a sketch show. They've known me for a while. You've always wanted to do a sketch show. Turn this into a combination of the podcast and a sketch show, which is what it ended up being.
And tell me a little bit, if you would, about pulling together the team that you have on the show, and Neil, when you got involved as well.
Well, we started talking about it before the pilot. And
we had to, because if we started talking about it on the day of the pilot, that would have been really weird.
I was insisting we wait, but you demanded
me. Get over here. There's cameras and everything. You gotta help me.
No. Yeah, I mean, we just started talking about it as how do we not just put cameras in a podcast, in a studio, but actually like make it for the medium and make it visual.
I had luckily been doing at that point a couple years, I think, of the Between Two Ferns shorts with Zach Galifianakis.
You guys seen Between Two Ferns?
So I was one of the co-creators of that, and one of the writers of it, and producer, obviously, and lately I've been directing them all. So I really got into the format of doing multi-camera interviews, which were then stitched together to make it seem like they were happening in real time, that we would improv. And there was something really cool about the non-scripted nature of them that I liked, that made them seem more off the cuff. So I got really into that, so I knew that was going to be a part of it. But then it was just kind of like sort of just figuring out what the rest of it would be. We knew that I needed to have a band of some sort. And Dan Pasternak at ISC suggested Reggie, and I thought that was a great idea. So
it was because you're following this kind of traditional talk show format, but putting your turn.
That's to me, that's the only reason the show kind of works, is because it's in this fake talk show format. We always kind of like reset and go back to home base, because I've done other sketch shows for places like Fox and Comedy Central, and the issue you always have is point of view of a sketch show. It's always very hard. Everyone wants to kind of do SNL over again, But it's very difficult because what SNL has is that format that's always the same, and they have a celebrity host that you are always excited to see. So I've done other sketch shows which are just like anything can happen, and you turn it on, and hey, there's one sketch, then there's another sketch, then there's another sketch, and it's very difficult for audiences to grasp onto what is happening, and it's very easy for them to tune out and go, oh, I didn't like that sketch, goodbye. So the fact that we're always going back to this fake talk show kind of gives it momentum narratively, which is in a very weird way. So we found that out during the pilot. We shot a lot of stuff for the pilot thinking that we would cut out sketches. And when we got to it, we were like, oh, everything's really funny. Can we just fit everything into the half hour? And we found a pace that we really liked out of that. We expected to cut stuff out, but we were like, no, I actually like how fast this is moving. So it just kind of evolved into that through luck, basically, off of the pilot.
And what is, and this is kind of a question for both of you, but like, what is the Scott Aukerman point of view that we see
Why
in
would
this
Neil
show?
answer that?
Hold on.
I'll take this one.
And Neil, television is a collaboration, so, what are you bringing to the table? What is different from Scott's perspective that you're bringing? But Scott, let's start.
Okay. In terms of the point of view of like my character that I play on the show, I knew I didn't want to be mean in it, like Zach is on the Between Two Ferns, and basically I get to do all those kind of slams in those things anyway.
Out of your system.
Yeah, I kind of wanted it to be bright and cheery and bright colors and fun. And in terms of my character, there's certain stuff that I like to do that these guys all kind of know and figured out. If it ever gets too mean, that's where I kind of balk a lot. Like if I ever think something's being mean to a guest or something, I usually back off on that.
And he just said balk, not balk. He starts to balk like a chicken.
Like a chicken.
It's like,
Yeah.
too mean.
Yeah. That's my alarm system that we've set up. I was hypnotized very early on in the process.
So we're hearing it, we know.
I may start taking my clothes off rapidly if you say the secret word. Just to...
A lot of pressure.
Yeah. Oh, pressure!
And Neil, what do you bring to the table?
He's the head writer, so a lot.
The writing staff is I used to be the artistic director at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in Los Angeles, and a lot of the writers that we have on the staff, I think basically everyone came out of there. And a few of them are from a sketch group, the Birthday Boys, who are going to have a show on IFC soon, and a few are from my sketch group, and we do a monthly show paired up together.
We have the head writer of The Onion as well, Seth Reese, on the staff this year.
Yes, who also used to do UCB in New York. And so I think if there's one thing that we all have in common with that sort of fits the show, it's that we're not typically like real mean or dark anyway. I think a lot of our approach is something that's, we kind of like friendly people and like...
There's a lot of like friendly humor in the show, like a lot of people being nice to each other. There's one sketch in particular coming up called Scotty Scares Him, which is... It was very hard for the editors to kind of wrap their brain around because, we have like absolutely produces the show, does Tim and Eric, awesome show, great job, or did it, as well as Nathan For You and other shows that are maybe slightly more aggressive. And that was a very difficult for them to wrap their head around. They had the first pass of it, they had edited it really fast because they thought the niceness in it was not funny. And we were kind of like, no, just put the nice stuff in it. And it's really funny to us of just people being nice to each other.
Yeah,
really
going out of their way to be super friendly.
Yeah.
It makes it totally different from a lot of other comedy events.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to do something that kind of felt really different because, the writers and we have kind of a sense of humor that we know when we see it what we like, So what Neil does is he kind of wrangles everyone. I'm not there all the time in the writing process, and Neil is the one to kind of, wrangle everyone and make sure that the stuff is getting written, and then it all kind of like comes up to me, and we work it out once it comes up to me.
Very quickly, and because I want to make sure we have time to get questions from the crowd, but Neil, what is your comedy background? What are your comedy influences? I mean, you worked at UCB, but before that, who do you look at, and can we see that stuff on the screen? Those influences?
I mean, Mr. Show was probably the biggest influence on me, kind of coming out of college and stuff. And then I'd gone to college with Paul Rust, who's one of the writers on the show, and we were just going around doing open mics and stuff around Los Angeles. And then we met Cool Op, Scott's now wife, then girlfriend, and
man, I was cheating on her constantly back then. Oh wait, I shouldn't have said that.
And but yes, Paul and I were like, hey, that's Scott Aukerman at a show once. So
because you knew him.
Yeah, we knew.
We were the few people in the world who would recognize me.
Fourth season of Mr. Show, right up before Scott Aukerman. We knew who he was, and we went to see a show Cool Op was in that Scott had directed, and then and then Scott started seeing us do some stuff, and we just started working together.
I really liked his aesthetic. And mainly because of that kind of friendliness while still having really super clever but hard jokes in it. I just liked the optimism of it, you know what I mean? And that's what we try to do in the show is make it fun and optimistic in a way that when we do Between Two Ferns, we just try to make it as hard and mean as possible.
What are your comedy influences? What stuff that you kind of grew up watching?
Monty Python was the biggest for me, but that was when I was 13. I had a girlfriend who showed me Monty Python, and I was like, oh, holy shit, this is awesome. And then my mom, I remember her saying, Monty Python is a dirty old man. You shouldn't be watching that. I think she thought that it was, what's his name?
Benny Hill.
Benny Hill, yeah. But the biggest influences on me when I hit 15, and they're the biggest influences in the show, were definitely Late Night with Dave Letterman and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, just Pee Wee Herman in general. And so I've tried to kind of make the show a combo of those two things, which is very exciting for me. Pee Wee Herman is on the show this year, and he does all new Pee Wee bits that he wrote for the show, which he hasn't written in a long time. It's kind of new bits to do that, and it was a huge thrill for me, and I got to tell him how much it meant to me, and that he's, the show is sort of, directly influenced by Playhouse, definitely. So that was a big thrill. Still waiting to get David Letterman on the show.
I was going to ask, are there guests who have gotten away? Guess you can't.
I've chased after Chris Elliott for a long time.
It feels very much in the vein of his humor too.
The timing has never worked out because he doesn't live in LA, so it's very much like if I can get him while he's in LA, I try. And he just got to LA to do Eagle Heart, and we were just wrapping, and he wasn't there a day earlier, and it was. But I've been chasing him for a while. But I was chasing Pee Wee Herman for the entire first season, and very quickly in the first, when we started the second season, he agreed to do it, and we had an awesome phone call where I got to talk to him about what he wanted to do, and it was really thrilling for me.
That's great. And talk to me just for a minute, and then we'll turn it over to you guys. And I'm going to request that you keep your questions brief, please, and to the point, and ideally, something that both of these guys can answer. But before we do that. Talk to me a little bit about the character bits where, comedians come in and play these characters. Improvised versus scripted, as well as, doling those out throughout the season and, how you decide who is in when.
The first year, I think that we had a lot of comedians on from the podcast who were doing their established characters. So, for instance, Nick Kroll, who does Fabrice, that's one he's done on the podcast and before the podcast in his act several times. Paul F. Tompkins doing Andrew Lloyd Webber, he did that in the first season. We changed it a little bit this year. We have a little less of that, and we have more people doing... it's all still improvised, but their character ideas, because we have a lot of people like Joe Latrulio, for instance, who don't really have established characters of their own, but they want to come on, or Ben Schwartz from Parks and Recreation. They don't do character work, but if you give them a one paragraph idea of a character, they can come in and improv it really great. So there's a little more of that this year. But the important thing for me is that they are improv interviews. I mean, all of these interviews are just kind of us trying to find it on the day that they're there. I mean, and Nick, I had no idea what he was going to do. He literally got to the set, and we had a 1-second check-in before he came out. I was like, so what do you want to do today? He's like, I don't know, something about, just something about craft service. I'm like, okay, great, we'll find it. And so that's fun and also terrifying a little bit for me to every day be kind of in the position of, okay, well, none of this is written. Let's hope that we find something. but it's been working out really well. I've seen about 9 of this year's episodes, and I'm very, very proud of them.
Yeah, and I mean, literally in those 2 episodes, Nick was one who had his established character, and that's an example of somebody who already does a character coming on and improvising. Jordan Peele doing Tan-Fu, that was like a beat sheet we gave him, but he still figures out the approach to the character, and how he's going to play it and all that. But and even specifically what he's going to say, and then there's just kind of like a roadmap for him. So that was sort of the 2 different ways to do the character guys.
I've seen some other fake talk shows, like Knowing Me, Knowing You with Alan Partridge, which I really love, but you could tell everything is a script in there, and I really like the improvisational feel of people finding it in the moment, and we are trying to put in more examples of like the people kind of laughing or breaking character a little bit, because there's so much of it while we're taping, it's so funny. And so we're trying to like just subtly, you can see like Aziz in the show kind of like breaking up on stuff, because it's really fun while we're doing it, so we want to kind of communicate that to people.
I would imagine that this could become, these are all pros you're working with, and obviously you're terrific. You're a great,
For the layman.
fresh
Golf pros.
Golf pros. We have an AmPro tournament every year after the season wraps. That's how you say it, right? AmPro, not Pro-Am.
Right.
Your reference is correct.
Sure, okay.
Have these improvisations gone on trying to find the thing? Like when you have no prep with someone like Nick, although, again, both you're great, you're going to find something, but,
we were putting together stuff, deleted stuff for the DVD that we thought was going to come out after the first season, but I think we're going to wait until after this season to do all 30 episodes. But we were putting together just like stuff we cut out. There's a ton of stuff that we cut out, because we usually tape with the main guest, the celebrity guest, we'll tape at least 20, 25 minutes with them for a 5-minute interview, and the same for the comedy guests. So there's a ton of stuff that we have that we've been editing together, just that people will hopefully see. But I really enjoy that, just like taping long and finding it. It leads to a spontaneity, I think, that you can see in the show.
Yeah, and I think maybe one change with the first season, the character guests, they were all established characters and almost no planning for them. So that was a little bit harder in terms of finding like the thread. And this season,
the days would run on a little bit more.
Yeah, this season I think the character guests, there is that roadmap that's a little bit like
slightly more detailed, but without dialogue.
Yeah, and that we know is like going to eventually be about the right running time.
We would do in the first season, we would do sometimes 3 takes with a character guest, and we'd be constantly going, well, how's it end? Where's it go? And that would get a little wearing on the celebrity guest, who are a lot of times my friend, so they're patient, but when it goes into the 6th hour of taping a 22-minute TV show, it can be a little like, we want to streamline.
And even the character guests who were doing more established things this season came on with like, oh, I'm just going to bring up this one specific idea, or it was definitely more manageable this year.
The whole process.
Yeah.
Is that because in the first season you were coming out of the podcast, and that's kind of how you do it on there?
It's a little bit, but also the first season we just didn't know what we were doing, so we did the whole. We only shot 5 weeks for those first 10 episodes, and every day we would go overtime, and 1 or 2 hours overtime, which, you do 12 hours already, to add a 13th and a 14th hour onto it is just super wearing. So when we came into this year, we were like, how do we simplify this a little bit? And I think we came up with a good way.
Yeah, I think also it was just that.
Shut up, he's moving on to the audience.
No, just that we also, it was a whole thing where we had to write the entire first season, then shoot it, then put it on air and see how people respond and stuff. So, unlike most shows where you can kind of learn from it as you're writing it.
You're writing episode 10 around when it premieres or so. Like this we had to just put it up and see what people thought. Now we sort of know what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
Let's get to some questions. Sure, right here.
I'm going to hold this up to you, and you can ask it in it, but don't
Phil Donahue style.
You're talking about having much more material in terms of time and the time restraints of the show. In the process, particularly in the improvised parts, do you ever feel while it's going on that it's time to rein somebody in, or do you just let it go the whole time and edit later?
We usually try to do at least one take where it just goes wherever. I mean, we always say, okay, let's keep on topic, and then they end up being like 15-minute long takes that just go crazy. And I love, we use a lot of those first takes for the flavor part of it, but then we try to go back and do another take which is more on story and go, okay, the simplest version of your appearance on this couch is you come out, you establish what you say, you have a couple of narrative beats of it, and then it ends. And we try to do one take like that we can always use as sort of template setter, if that makes any sense.
Other questions?
Oh God, please. More than one question, this is embarrassing.
I noticed now that Reggie is reading the opening credits. Are you guys trying to reach out to a more illiterate fan base?
That was something the network wanted. I actually really like it because I think talk shows do that. That's what the announcer does on a talk show. So, but I think it was more of a note from them of this. It's probably a minute long title sequence is the same every episode. What can we do to make people not tune out mentally during it? So strangely it gives it some kind of like momentum, if that makes any sense. But I like it.
I was actually going to ask. I mean, that title sequence seems like the most kind of mainstream, straightforward part of the show. Was this IFC dictated, or what is your relationship with the network?
The network, I will say, they're great. I'm laughing because I will say they tested the show in between seasons, which is, terrifying because you get a lot of feedback about
what is some of that
how
feedback?
awful you are.
But they're smart people over there. They
yes.
Let creators create.
And they're very much they want to collaborate with me on it. So they were very much concerned about my feelings going forward of like, would you like to do such and such? And we collaborated on a slightly different structure than the first season of the shows going forward, simplifying it a little bit, not having as many guests. Sometimes we would have 3 guests per show. And I worked, in their research they found that the third person people were tuning out, and because there was too much going on. So we simplified it a little bit in order to kind of just live in it a little more. We're not as concerned with like every second there has to be some new crazy thing.
And I'm curious too, from a production standpoint, like Neil, have you and the writers kind of gotten used to a schedule? Have you guys figured out, we know what makes this show tick by the end of those 10, and were you thrown for that second season, or did it feel like...
No, well, I know even before it was picked up, kind of something, the idea that we had talked about going in was, we didn't even know yet the format changes necessarily that IFC would want, but something that we just wanted was more kind of like through-line things in episodes, because there's a couple like that in the first season, and those just sort of feel more cohesive.
So like the Mediship thing is a through line, a story that kind of makes people want to see how it ends, if that makes sense. And a lot of the changes that we had talked about of like, oh, I hope we get to do this later, that was...
There's some kind of Friday Night Lights event right
now. A lot of the changes that we wanted to do, IFC was like nervous about talking they had wanted to do, and they were like, we're hoping you're okay with this, and we were like, oh, we've already been talking about that, and they were relieved. So it was a really friendly process talking to IFC about what exactly they wanted.
Yeah, so it was just the through line thing that was, I guess, in terms of like knowing when we had enough, we sort of make sure, does every episode have a through line, or at least like a bookend, like the mental asylum thing in the premiere and stuff like that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the show has figured out what it is in many ways. I mean, it was so much fun in that first season, but it feels like it breathes a little more, it feels a little more living in a great way.
Thank you, Ben, of the Thrilling Adventure Hour.
Oh,
and Wolverine Season 1 in Comic Stores this Wednesday.
More questions? You guys have more questions? Yeah.
Come on. Okay. I noticed in the ships at Ocala.
Oh, yeah.
Are you just like calling over to UCB and just kind of asking?
Yeah, I mean, I texted Echo and said, can you do this bit?
Neil is a great resource for actors to be in the show. We actually have a casting person, David Zwick, that we would say, "What are Zwick's picks today?" And I felt really bad because we nixed Zwick's picks.
Oh yeah.
Every episode. I think he ended up giving us 3 people that we used in the show, and it was because we needed a kid at one point.
We needed a kid or an old person.
Or an old person. Because that's one of the greatest things about doing the show is I get to give our friends parts. I mean, they're not always the biggest parts, but you'll see like even someone doing an extra part sometimes, or even one line will be like a UCB person who's really funny, and that's just really fun for me to have a show where a lot of shows you have a cast in it, and the reason you have a cast is because the network or the production company will make a deal with those people in order to have them be paid less than what you would pay, what you would accrue in casting a whole bunch of different types of people. Our talent line in the budget is one of the biggest lines in the budget because we are constantly going to different people for every single episode. And so it costs a lot of money to do that, but thankfully IFC was really supportive of that. That's kind of what makes the show fun, I think, is the fact that we can have Echo Kellum in one episode and we don't have to put him in all 20 and figure out what to do with it. And not that that would be a drag at all, because Echo's really funny. But that's really fun for us, is to, every single person you'll see in the show is actually a really great comedian, even if you don't know who they are.
We're just about out of time. I want to ask you guys a couple of quick questions. Obviously, Scott, you come from sketch and from comedy, so this is pushing the right buttons for you.
That's what I require in my job.
But you're also, I know you as a theater guy.
Yeah.
Are you getting that, like, let's put on a show feeling from doing this show?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fun to do kind of the whole, like, hey, gang, like, come on, we're all friends, we're all putting on a show. I am a theater and musical theater background. I have one of those, so our 10th, that's an inelegant way of putting that sentence, but I am musical theater, have one background that is that thing that you said. But, so our 10th episode, our mid-season finale, is a gigantic musical episode that I, basically, Paul F. Tompkins as Andrew Lloyd Webber has written a musical version of the show because he loves the talk show, but the one thing he hates is the talking. So it's a big epic. So I think people are really going to enjoy that.
And it's phenomenal that you can be ambitious like that. You have the freedom to do that.
This season, because we're doing 20 episodes, we have the freedom to mess around in that a little bit. And if we were only doing 10, I think it would be obnoxious to say, okay, well, every other episode is a weird conceptual thing, because we always want to come back and reset to the template, But now that we're doing 20, we're doing some major, huge things. We have one episode, our Sliding Doors episode, where it looks at both realities, one where I make the bus to the show and one where I don't make the bus to the show. And at one point, the very last day of filming that one, I looked at the AD and I was like, how long have we been filming this show? And she was like, 8 days, which is a long time. I've been wearing the same clothes for 8 days, which I guess a lot of people, if you're filming a movie that happens in one night, you're wearing like the same clothes for 3 months or something. But I was unused to it. I was just like, how long have we been doing this? 8 days, which is super long for us. So there's some really ambitious stuff that we get to do because we have so many episodes that we're doing.
And then finally, Neil and then Scott, what are you watching on TV? Is there stuff that's getting you excited about television? Stuff that the room is talking about or that you and your friends are talking about?
Let's see. I still watch every episode of South Park. That's one of my favorite shows. We watch, I think, everything that everyone watches. The Mad Men's and the Breaking Bads and the Game of Throneses of the world.
For me, Mad Men is the best show on television. I just love it. It's not based on like dramatic plot occurrences. It's all about emotional stakes. That's my favorite thing. I watch a lot of drama. I don't watch a lot of comedy. But the comedies I love, Parks and Rec, I think, is the greatest. Happy Endings was my favorite show. I hope they get sold somewhere. That's such a great show. Friday Night Lights, they were right. It was great.
Please give a round of applause.
Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate you coming.